AME Church. Kunil James. And James Duckett. I'm sorry, Reverend Duckett. We have from the City Councilwoman Vanessa Gibson and Dennis Rodriguez. We have from the State Senate Liz Kruger, Senator Brian Benjamin, our home state senator here, and Jamal Bailey. From the State Assembly of Assemblyman Felix Ortiz and Michael Blake, who is also the national co-chair of the Democratic Party. We have also from 100 Black Men, the president of 100 Black Men, Michael Garner. We have the head of the New York Civil Liberties Union, Donna Lieberman. And of course, we are honored to have the District Attorney of the Bronx, Darcel Clark. Have I left anyone out? Assemblyman Al Taylor. Well, he's here so often, I took for granted everybody knew who Al Taylor was. Reverend Derek Hawkins. Let me say that we've gathered this morning because over the last several days, there has been several attacks and incidents against members of the Jewish community. If it had been attacks against the members of the Black community, we would have stood up and spoke out. We cannot remain silent as we see a consistent pattern of attacks against people based on their faith and based on who they are. And therefore, we wanted to convene to say you can't fight hate against you unless you are willing to fight hate against everyone else. You cannot be anti-hate and pro-civil rights only one way. So we rise, particularly since the incidents involved blacks that have been arrested and charged, to say that we will not be silent and that we condemn any attacks, any hate crimes, any efforts by anyone to try and in any way impede the continuing move toward trying to heal whatever we have had to try and heal in the Black and Jewish community. We are not unaware that there has been tensions, but we have also been those that have strived to work those tensions out down through the years. And this will not set us back. We will cooperate and stand with any move in our community to investigate hate crimes, no matter who the hated and no matter who the hater. We want to be crystal clear as the elected officials from the governor to the mayor move on these issues, that we encourage members of our community to cooperate and stand for what is right and righteous. Let us not forget, as we pray today for the health of John Lewis, the congressman from Georgia, that he constantly reminded us that we're in the generation behind, that if it hadn't been for Goodman, Cheney, and Swerner, two Jews and a black, we would not have gotten the Voting Rights Act. It was Rabbi Abraham Heschel that marched with Dr. King. We cannot afford to be divided, and when there is wrong on either side, we must speak up, we must step up, we must stand up loudly and denounce it. Yes, we have had issues. Yes, there are going to be some on either side that are always going to bring up past issues. But let the word go forward that we're not living in the past, and we're not going to let some bring us back to the past. We are going to build a future together where it is understood that hate anywhere is hate everywhere. When you attack anyone, you're attacking me too. I called Rabbi Mark Snyder
Yes.
and said to him, we need to convene and we need to make a statement right in Harlem where the last suspect was found and caught. Harlem's not a refuge for that.
No.
He didn't come from Harlem, but anybody can't just run to Harlem and act like there's a refuge here. That's why ministers are here. That's why those of us that fight. And so from the same stage that we fought for Diallo and Abner Louima and Trayvon Martin and Eric Gardner, from the same stage that we fought hate crimes in Gina, Louisiana, from the same stage, we fight the hate crimes that have happened in Jersey City all the way to what happened in Marseille. We fight hate, not just hates against one color or one kind. Before I bring the rabbi on, and I'm also glad to show that this is an ongoing situation, Reverend Green and others on our national board, Howard Tisch, who is the regional head of the American Jewish Congress, recently joined the board of National Action Network. This is even before this last wave, because this is something we're committed to. We should not have Dr. King's picture on the wall if we're not going to live up to what Dr. King taught. Now, there are others that will say whatever they have to say, and we don't speak for everybody, but we do speak for ourselves, and we're going to speak loud and clear. I want us, before we hear from the rabbi, to hear from the state president of the NAACP state conference, the legendary Hazel N. Dukes.
Thank you, Reverend, for always standing up and bringing us together. You recited where we've been here before, and we are here today, as you say, to stand against hate. Let me say that 110 years old is the NAACP. They tried it in Niagara Falls and it didn't work. A white woman on Fifth Avenue called the minds together. The Jewish community has been a backbone for the NAACP. As Reverend Sharpton said, we didn't start this morning. It's been continuing. It's been a continuing of us building. He's right. Yes, there's been tension. Howard, we were there. Reverend Sharpton, we were there. But when we were in Brooklyn, we were there with a loud voice against hate, bringing the community together. We will not allow anyone to tear us apart. 5 branches of the NAACP is in Nyack, Spring Valley, Ellenville. They'll be there today with our Senator Schumer. He's having a conference there today. That community will stand up also. We're going to stand up all over this country. And when Reverend and his staff call us together, you can see today with this leadership you have on this stage, nobody will turn us around. Even if it was my son, I will be speaking out. Even if it was my daughter, I will speak out. Because the teaching of our Christianity tell us to love those who hate us, do good. And that's why we are here today, because we will continue to heal our communities. Thank you, Reverend. Thank you, ministers, all elected officials, for I know everyone is busy, but thank you for standing with us today.
We're joined by the congressman. We'll hear from him in a few minutes, Adriana Espiat, who will also have some words. Let us hear now from Rabbi Mark Snyder.
Yes.
Thank you, Reverend Sharpton. Thank you, dear Hazel, for those very passionate words. Friends, when you review, when you examine the civil rights era of the 1950s and 1960s, no segment of American society provided as much and as consistent support to African Americans and to Dr. King, as did the Jewish community. As both Reverend Sharpton and Hazel Dukes articulated, that it was the historic Black-Jewish alliance that led to some of the greatest political and social changes in the history of our nation. Unfortunately, after the tragic assassination of Dr. King, that relationship began to spiral downward. It became defined by an element of conflict and not cooperation. But for the past 15 years, Reverend Sharpton and I have been working together to bring about a reconciliation, to bring about a strengthening of relations between African Americans and Jews so that in the city of New York, it is cooperation and not conflict that is the defining element in Black-Jewish relations. When I spoke yesterday with Reverend Sharpton, I reminded myself that a people who fight for their own rights are only as honorable as when they fight for the rights of all people.
Yes.
And to be standing here with such a distinguished group of civil rights leaders, I could not help but immediately accept Reverend Sharpton's invitation to join everyone here today. As Reverend Sharpton said to me yesterday, how deeply disturbed he is by the anti-Semitic attacks on the Jewish community, particularly when many of these attacks have been perpetrated by members of the African American community. Friends, you'll find that Jewish history, and with this I conclude, one thing we have learned in Jewish history, Reverend Al, that casual Jews become Jewish casualties. And we cannot fight our battles alone. And as we were there for the African American community and continue to be there with the African American community, we need the African American community and its leaders to speak out, particularly this being the last day of Hanukkah. It's the Festival of Light. And just look at the light on this stage, the light of understanding and caring that keeps aglow the relationship between African Americans and Jews. So finally, my friends, Dr. King was very fond of quoting the words of the English philosopher and statesman Edmund Burke, who said that all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Today, I am standing among all the good people who are here to do something and to protect and to defend the Jewish community of New York. We thank you so much, Reverend Sharpton, Hazel Dukes, and the leadership. Thank you.
Rabbi Mark Schneider, let us hear from Congressman Adriano Espaillat.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Reverend Hazel Dukes. This is another unfortunate crossroad in America. I come here with a heavy heart. Over a year ago, we had a white supremacist group go up to Washington Heights, to Fort Washington Avenue, over 100 of them, walking distance from here, to a neighborhood that was traditionally, and is traditionally, a Jewish neighborhood, where many Jewish families settled there after the war when they fled Nazi Germany, when they fled the Holocaust. They settled there. And with the years, also surrounding that neighborhood, it became an immigrant neighborhood as well. Many immigrants from all over the world have settled in Washington Heights. It has the George Washington Bridge, which is the Golden Gate to New York City there. And I suppose that those white supremacists went there precisely because they knew the symbolic nature of that neighborhood. And they went there to spew their hate, their message. And they rolled out a banner against immigrants, and they perhaps thought they would place fear in our neighbors, but that's a resilient neighborhood. We came out the next day. And when the Nation, the prestigious media outlet, did a foil on ICE to find out who they surveilled, it turns out that the vigil that we had protesting the presence of those white supremacist groups was surveilled by ICE. So this is an epidemic. This is an epidemic. And as Martin Luther King used to say, the silence of our friends, right? It's very critical. The silence of our friends. Those that spew hate do it in a very loud, noisy way. We can hear them, but we can also hear the silence of our friends when that happens. So that's why I'm here today, because they will come after those of the Jewish faith tonight, and if we don't act, tomorrow they will come out after Christians.
That's right.
And if we don't act, they will go after Muslims. And if we don't act, they will go after immigrants. And if we don't act, they will go after Americans, African Americans. And if we don't act, they will go after the LGBT community.
That's right.
And so we must not turn our heads. When they go after one of us, they go after all of us. And that's why we're here today. That's why we're here today. So I want to thank the Reverend Rabbi for bringing this forum. And we must sit down with law enforcement. And we must sit down with the leaders of the Jewish community, break bread and come together so we can combat this epidemic. This is an epidemic in America. I'm not here to point fingers at anybody. We should not engage in pointing fingers either. This is something that we should resolve proactively.